Hello, and welcome back to the Logan's Run project, part 253.7. This might be a bit of a train wreck stream today. We shall see. I need to remember where we were. This has been about 10 days or so. 10 days to 2 weeks, maybe not quite 2 weeks. Between 10 days and 2 weeks. Since I've last been on this particular horse. Hopefully I haven't forgotten everything. Hopefully folks remember. I don't have any particular programming notes, but happy Monday as the stream goes. Let me go ahead and just get, wrong button, get the window up. Let's see, here we go. All right. We're looking at more or less where we were. We were doing a lot of the nation building for our outsider kingdoms, nations. Like I want to call them cultures because I don't know. We don't know what kind of cultures they are yet, or at least what their organization is. I think maybe we're going to get to that with these tools today. But if we recall, these are the domes. We're leaving them alone. They're actually two different factions, if you will, or organizations or nations, whatever you want to call it, inside the domes. One being what we would call traditionally the dome culture of Renew. I think we call them the citizenry. And then the newer culture that's broken off that was all about sanctuary, finding sanctuary. But we also had these outsider ones here, north, east, southeast, and southwest. And those are the ones that we came through and have been adding a lot of detail in here, a lot of things they think about themselves, how they relate to each other, so on and so forth. What you can't see is I'm pulling up Worlds Without Number again so I can try to remember, because this is about where we were in the process. I know we were somewhere in that nation building area, but I'm trying to remember exactly where. Had we gone through? Yes, we'd done this. Okay, so I'm just scrolling through, riveting video. We had gotten some themes, I think. Had we done themes? Had we done themes? I think we did. Did we? Maybe we hadn't done. Oh, we had a theme here. Yeah, theme. Decadence, Sins and Fadings. Did I mean to have two different themes for the Southeastern? Did we have that? Oh, I think I had a positive and negative theme. Now it's starting to come back to me. All right, so we had gotten positive and negative themes. So, for example, for the Southeastern Outsider Nation, a positive theme of renewal, things growing brighter, but then also a negative theme of decadence, of sins and fadings. And we had repeated that for the Southwest and for the Northeast as well. So we had that stuff going on. All right, so now we can verify we had done that step. Now we're going to get to society construction. This should be good. Let me zoom in here. I will read the intro text from this. Society construction. This is from Worlds Without Number. If you want to follow along at home, I am on page 128. A nation is the product of its society. While you can easily sketch the borders of a particular fantastic domain on a map, the more difficult part of the process is thinking about the kind of people who live there, the things they value, and the way they organize their lives will have inevitable consequences when thinking about their government, their conflicts, and their ambitions. Did we get through this part? Let me see. Oh, we did this already. Never mind. I spoke too soon. We had gotten through that too. I was wondering, because it sounded familiar. All right, let's see. Okay, government guide. So let's skip ahead now to page 132 for government construction. Like I said, apologize. This might be a little bit of a train wreck as I'm refining my footing. It's been almost 2 weeks. When building a government for a nation, tribe, or other polity, it's important to keep in mind the purpose of your work. While there's a great deal of pleasure to be had in world building for world building's sake, a working GM should keep in mind 3 fundamental purposes in building any government. And just the bolded parts, what these 3 fundamental purposes are. Government should provide adventure hooks. Government should provide guidelines for reacting to PC actions. And governments should fit the thematic goal of the nation. Then the first bit underneath that, once we keep those in mind, we've got governmental density. First, we need to decide how dense the nation's governmental resources are. Low-density governments tend to exist in tribal societies, small fiefs, compact institutions such as monasteries, or poor nations that produce very little surplus. Medium-density governments are found in richer polities or tribal nation-states where there's enough surplus to feed a thin layer of functionaries. And then finally, high-density government is sort most familiar to modern readers, being a fair description of many of the modern nations of the world. So essentially, how much bureaucracy we have here. Is it low density, in which case you just can't support a lot of bureaucracy? People have to work. There's not enough surplus to engage people to do things that don't lead to getting more resources. So if you imagine a tiny farming community, can't have a full-time bailiff or judge or sheriff type person, because simply put, they don't have enough. There's not enough resources around to pay for that person to not also be helping out farming. So they might have a part-timer, they might have something else. Maybe they can afford one person, but they can't afford any deputies, that kind of thing. Or maybe they have one person that manages a larger region. So you might have someone that does a number of things, or works with a number of communities. Everything. I don't know. I think kind of the Wild West when you think about the judge that's for a whole territory, or the posse, right? They're part-timers. When you need something, you can get them together, do it, but then they have to disperse back. Medium density, obviously, you do have, they're calling it a thin layer, some small number of people whose only jobs is to do these kind of functions, bureaucratic functions. And of course, what we have, high density with thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of people whose only jobs are in the bureaucracy. And we can do that because we have enough resources and things that we can support people whose only jobs are to be these kind of middlemen for the government. It's not giving us a table here, so I guess we're supposed to pick. So let's go to our chart, and I'll put in a government. Here we go. I'm going to put it here. Yeah. Government. So we'll think of what the density is for this one. So in the southeast, we kind of think about a number of things for the southeast. As far as the terrain, where the southeast is in this grasslands and then the grassland hills combination. So what we know from our geographic notes, military experience, so they got a significance. And we talk about here having these forts on the hills. It's sparsely populated. There are remnants of some kind of native population, and it subtly changes those who live there. The hills are very tough. There was some kind of mad prophet at some point that tried to start a faith here. There's a bunch of people in here, and I think we posited maybe they're all military. It has those same elemental emanations that we've seen, and then we have these time and space slip effects. So as far as we can tell, that we have a large amount of organized military leaning population in sort of on the borders, really. There's some kind of town here. We could think about that. And then really between the town and maybe these border areas, a lot of these grasslands here are not very populated. So we might say it's pretty densely populated in this city or center. And then out here on the perimeter, protecting them from all the stuff that might be coming across from the central lands. So when we think about that, we could keep that in mind when we come back over here. We know that there have been wars. There are local aristocrats. There's some kind of decadence, which would seem to indicate that they have at least some enough resources to potentially support some, maybe more than the leanest form of government. Physical appearance, we're not going to worry about that right now. They do value aesthetic unworldliness and a pious poverty, which would probably lead to having more resources. They definitely like subtlety and indirectness of action, which certainly politicians fit into that group. Their aesthetics are kind of Mongolian steppe nomad like. If we were going to pick, this was, if we were to find somewhat of an analog to Earth historical cultures, what we might look at is Mongolian steppe nomads, but they also have a lot of professional guilds. So putting all these together, I'm going to make the initial statement that is medium density. And they have a fairly good area of the map that's there. So I'm going to say between all that stuff, I'm going to make the call for right now. They're medium density. Now we're just going to repeat that for Southwest. Come over to Southwest. Give them a government area. Now we look at the South. We look here in the Southwest. Some of those, looking at those geographic elements again, we've got, let's see, the wetlands are kind of a little bit inside there. They've got the trade route, but this part here, they got the trade route running through, but it's very depopulated. It used to be more populated in the mixed forest area here. It's pretty dangerous. There are some ancient sites. There was a significant battle. It is heavily populated, and there are secessionist rebels, and rulership is disputed. And then in the hills, has a lot of production, sparsely populated, but some local lords, also rulership is disputed. I'm going to say that this kind of leads me to think, looking, and I guess we should look at here too, as far as their values, exploring the unknown and discovering secrets, dominating other people, their religious factions or faith alliances. Their Earth analog, we're looking at the Mali Empire, which I need to read up on, and what kind of problems they have. I've got to move this so it's not. They got some monsters who are coming in. Goods are fleeting. And then, let's see. Academy was lured away. I can't remember if that they lured it away or if it was lured away from them. I probably need to verify that. And they had this foreign culture. I'm going to say that probably also, especially given that their analog is something that I think was a fairly organized, I'm going to say medium density. I don't think any of these places are going to be high density. Nothing accounting to even close to what a modern government would look like with all its bureaucracy. And then finally, we can look at the Northeast. I'm just going to put in a spot there. When we look at the Northeast, they're in this little zone here, kind of still of those hills, kind of mixed hills, or hills and grasslands, which is, again, military significance, a mad prophet tried to start a faith here. That I never even made that connection, but it might be that he emigrated up to, or, that person doesn't have to be, he moved up to that other spot. Definitely more it's populated. And they like justice. There was a wicked minister that had been exposed. There was aspiring. All that stuff over here would seem to indicate that it also has a medium density government. We got our densities. The next thing per Worlds Without Number we're supposed to look at is the ruling authority. And now we're finally going to get to rolling some dice. As usual for these sorts of things, I am using the Dice Maiden bot on Discord to roll my dice. First, I'm going to roll for the ruling authority. We'll start with, go the same way we did. So we'll start in the Southeast. Roll to 1. So there's so the Southeast has a single monarch. the monarchy. Now, northwest, or sorry, southwest. Southwest gets a 4. Large number of smaller rulers. That actually makes sense. As usual, I feel like things come out and they make sense. So we'll call it regional rulers. Multiple regional rulers. And then for the northeast, we're getting another monarchy. So we get 2 monarchies and then a somewhat disorganized. Oops. 2 monarchies, and then it always is interesting because the southwestern, because of the things it's dealing with, it totally makes sense. This place is disputed. There are multiple. It's sort of being broken down into factions. There's a lot of stuff going on, so it makes tons of sense that they would have these a sort of a number of multiple rulers as opposed to one ruler. So it's kind of cool that the dice decided to kind of give us what everything else had been suggesting already. And we need a ruling class. This one is a D12 table. Proletariat, peasantry, or artisans. So the ruling class is where are these rulers drawn from, what class or classes provide the leadership. So artisans or proletariat, peasantry. That's for southeast. I'm just going to add it here. Proletariat. And then for the southwestern, this one will be interesting. Got the same one. I was going to say this ruling class actually made a lot of sense because of the way that's already got this factionalization happening with these religious factions and everything. So it kind of really does make sense. But that might. And then this one actually makes sense too because these have these guilds or groups. And that kind of makes sense. So, interesting how those connections seem to work out. But we got the same thing twice. Hopefully it won't. I don't know if I want the same thing a third time. Just get something different. Roll 2 5s and a 6. 6 is minority ethnicity of long historical rule. Minority ethnicity of long historical rule. Okay, that's interesting. That is up here. I think I gotta move. Boy, this is these lines. Let's see. What was it? My minority ethnicity of long historical rule. So there's been some ruling ethnic minority that's been in charge for a while. Whoops. And now we get to the next rolling dice is their source of legitimacy. Another D12 roll. The gods chose them as leaders. So this is for going back around. We're going in kind of circles. We're going in circles. And these are God. That's supposed to be God's chosen. Am I reading that right? Got 4 gods chose them. Yep, they're God's chosen. Starting to get a sense. All this stuff is right. It's giving us a lot of these little details, giving us a sense of going on. They're just hints right now. Loved for their benevolence. Well, that's interesting. We got all these. I'm gonna do a couple here because we got multiple rulers here. So let's just get a few different ideas of what. Rolling in order. And it crushed the last batch of rebels. That one makes a lot of sense for the Southwest. And we'll give them one more. That rule of three. We'll go with the rule of three. John Lennon in the chat says, I don't think that pre-populating the world with generic groups helps the campaign evolve. You want to tie in communities with adventures as you develop them, and this is just taking away the focus from everything we know about Logan's Run. I think that's... I see what you're saying, John Lennon. But we don't know a lot of this stuff, right? The whole point of this isn't to just make the Logan's Run campaign. It was using Logan's Run as an inspiration that we're basing a lot of stuff off of, but to kind of look at it a little bit more of if they could have expanded out the world of Logan's Run and done more about it than just done the Logan's Run movie, kind of what might be out here and what might they do. And of course, generally putting it into more of a fantasy, we presumably come more of a fantasy or sci-fantasy concept. So we don't know anything about the outside world in Logan's Run other than what's his name, the one guy, that kind of librarian guy out there. So we have no idea. This is fitting them in. I think that you can call it a chicken and egg thing, right? As far as communities with adventures, you can certainly build out, as you're saying here, tie in communities with adventures as you develop them. Sure, that works. But the other thing you can do, and I think often helps for me, is that the communities inspire your adventures. The communities give me ideas. These relationships that we're building, all these different ways these particular groups give me a lot of inspiration to do things. So I don't look at it just a one-way thing of, I should only develop this stuff when I have an adventure mind. Well, this stuff's going to help me generate adventures. These things are going to help me. I was going to do one more. I think they're going to help me come up with ideas. So I don't entirely agree. I see there's certainly a stylistic thing, and certainly some people's styles of writing or of doing campaigns are going to work one way more than the other. And the other thing, remember, the other part of this exercise was to go through all the worlds without number stuff in a practical way. Right? That was really if we look at the genesis of this whole thing, it was, hey, here's a concept. We have Logan's Run, a movie I like. What if we were going to kind of make a campaign based off of Logan's Run in some way, and then using the tools and worlds with a number? Now, granted, if I didn't feel the need to use all the tools, we could just say, well, let's just skip all this stuff because we don't need it. But that might skip over a lot of the tools. And as an exercise, I want to use as many of the tools as possible. So that's, another thing. Sure, in your version, you might hand wave all this stuff away and say, I'm only interested in the domes. And then outside the domes is a wasteland that's basically only got a handful of individuals in there. And it's just kind of there is to show the lie to the dome culture. That's fine. But I'm trying to do a little bit more than that. And, part of it, frankly, is because the one of the reasons why I'm doing this at all was to show, or at least maybe not show is not the right word, to see how these tools work in practical application. And the last one I got for this was, oops, no, I didn't want that. Always been the rulers. I think is number 1 on the list. And I rolled that a few times because we'd gotten a number of individual rulers. And the other thing in mind is this pre-population is at a very high level. We're not locking anything down now, but when we get into what we're going to do with all these individual place this is going to give us all these tools to help us do that. Also, I wouldn't say that I feel particularly locked in, and we can always change it if we get to a point where we get further in and something we did back here just doesn't mesh with our new what we want to do now, or we just have come to a different understanding, then we can do that too. All right, I also got that. So I got the same one twice, but that's okay. For the Northeast, I also got, they've always been the rulers. Leers. Lurs. Next on our checklist, if you will, is we're going to establish who the servants of the ruling order are. How do the rulers exert their will on the people? What institutions or functionary classes exist to make sure their commands are carried out and their laws are respected? Let's find out. It's another D12. I'm probably going to roll it for that one, the multiple rulers. I'll roll it a few different times so we get some variation between these little smaller rulers. 12, a specific ethnic client group of the ruler. That's interesting. Wonder who that could be. Specific client ethnic group. That one's going to go back. So going kind of in order. And we've got, wait, what is this? What are you calling this again? This is their agents of control. Specific ethnic client group agents. Specific ethnic client group agents. And now I'm going to roll this. Let's see. Roll a 6. So for the first one, we get savage brutes on the governmental leash. That's kind of funny or interesting. For the ones who are loved for their benevolence, have savage brute agents on the governmental leash. So it's definitely interesting. We could have some fun with how they manage to keep both those things going. And for the second group, we get ingrained obedience. That's a good one. So this is another one that sort of makes sense. You've crushed the last batch of rebels, and you've basically just beaten the obedience into whoever's left. And then the last one. Where's my dice maiden? 1d21, no 1d12. 9. At least we're getting some different ones this time, just for variation. Oh, it's not. It's the same. I got that one twice. Did I? Did I misread the first time? Nope, I did get 9 twice. All right, so it's the same thing. Ingrained obedience. I'll just link that. Same dealio. And then finally, in the Northeast, what have they got? 7. Economy controlling officialdom. Some lag there. So they get some economy controlled official agents. All right, we can keep interesting stuff. We can keep plowing ahead. Now we're going to get the forms of rulership. So we know that with the one monarch, so this is basically fleshing out a little bit the details that we rolled earlier. So we're looking at that monarchy, but kind of, who is the monarchy exactly? And there's a few choices. So we'll roll for single rulers, it's a D8. So it's a warlord recognized as the strongest. I'm just going to fill these in kind of as I go. So this would be for the Northeast. Or actually, sorry, they're both the same, right? Government's another monarchy. Yeah, so I can put that here. And it's the strongest warlord. And the other one that's also a single is that another D8 roll. 8. Does 8 get us something fancy? Ooh, wielder of some magical legitimacy. There we go. That's nice. Magical legitimacy. Finally, we have to roll a few or maybe we don't. Let's see. I think it's saying no. I guess we don't because it says we're just going to roll one for multiple. An oopsie that nobody can see but me because I scrolled the wrong way in the PDF. Yuck, yuck, yuck. All right, this is a D8 again, but this one is now for multiple ruler as opposed to one ruler. And they elect chosen by ruling class electors. Well, that's an interesting wrinkle, but there's a lot of disputes. But they're elected. Let me just get a swig of water here for the working man. So this one where everything's disputed, maybe they have some kind of Senate, some kind of other mechanism for trying to choose. Trying to choose leaders. Maybe this is even put in to keep the peace, but it's not working. What was the phrasing they used? Elected, chosen by ruling class electors. Maybe I will roll this for different. I don't know. Let's. It said multiple rulers. Did they mean multiple rulers? Maybe I should roll one. I don't know. Should I roll one for each different one or not? Kind of like the idea that there's some kind of Senate group and it's all falling apart. Well, maybe all of these are. Actually, I'm trying to link stuff on here, and I'm probably doing this wrong. Link that to those. All right. So basically, all of these, there's some kind of. All these groups are loosely in some kind of confederation that is failing, which I think makes sense. It makes sense to me. We're talking if you can't see, because you might be listening to this later, if we're in the Southwestern Outsider Nation, has multiple regional rulers, some that are formed from a proletariat peasantry, some are loved by their benevolence, some just took power by crushing less rebels, and then some have just always been the rulers, and they've been using a power base of various types, but they are, to the extent that this place is still one single nation state of a type, they have some kind of confederation going on. Or it might have been more strongly at some point a stronger type of government, but right now it maybe a loose partnership, or maybe that's part of the dispute, is how tight or how loose they are all tethered together. And that leaves I did the other one, right? So I did the 2 single rulers, I did the multiple rulers. I think, boy, this is really stretching out here now. I think I did. Yep, I did. Because in the South, we have the ruler is some wielder of magical legitimacy, which is very cool and evocative, but I have no idea what it means yet. Delete that for right now. And then now we need, what is the current struggle within the government? So this will be fun. Gives us some nice, what's gone wrong? Not that there aren't multiple things going wrong, but as far as the government's going, what's not quite right? Different class demands a share of the rule. So this is for we're starting with these with the Southeast. What am I going to see? What they call it? They call it a struggle. Current struggle. Struggle. Rolled 7, which is a different class demands a share of the rule. And share of rule. That's interesting because we know in this one that we have some clients. A client group a specific ethnic group acts as agents. And we also know that the monarchy is chosen from some kind of peasant, the sort of general proletariat, peasantry or artisans. But maybe it makes more sense if there is a struggle that it wouldn't just be the peasants. Maybe it is some kind of artisans that are controlling things and somebody else wants in. We don't know. Obviously, we don't know why yet. Now for the Southwest. 2 ministers are trying to usurp power. I mean, that makes so much sense for the Northeast, but we got the Southwest. Interesting. Oh, actually, I should know this is wrong. There we go. Usurp power. This is going to be fascinating because we have all of a sudden we have these multiple regional rulers. Maybe these rulers were ministers. Maybe there's boy, this is really becoming a fantastically labyrinthine situation over here in the Southwest with who is doing the leading. Seems like there's definitely factions arising that are not getting along with each other, causing all kinds of difficulties. And finally, in the Northeast, number 1 on the hit parade, rulers trying to crush a too powerful lord. Oh. Ooh. Rulers trying to crush a too powerful lord. That could be. I wonder who that could be. Don't know yet. We don't know. We are just rocketing along. Now we get to some one-roll government details. If you remember this from our read-through of Worlds Without Number, they have a page that has a number of different tables. Just make some rolls. The kind of things we're looking to work in here now is how established is the current ruler? What problems do their ministers have? What's their strength? How stable are they? who's causing problems, and a recent government event. So I'm going to go through all the tables for each one of our kingdoms and then go to the next one like that to keep it organized. Let's see. I just need to move things around here. Give something some space. Everybody needs space. Well, let's see. So I guess maybe I'll call this. What should I call this? How established is the current ruler? I'm trying to think organizationally how I want this to look on the page, but I guess I'll just start rolling dice and then I'll see what happens. Well, the current ruler is they have some basic ties with strong allies. Basic ties with strong allies. That's a nice little rhyme. Basic ties with strong allies. Next is what problems do their ministers have? 5. Distracted by factional infighting. Distracted by factional infighting. Minister problems. Distracted by factional infighting. Okay. We've got now, what is a strength? Governmental strength. We get diplomats are remarkably cunning. They've got a cunning diplomatic corps. Cunning diplomatic corps. And I think that makes sense because one of their major values is subtlety and indirectness of action. So yeah, it makes sense that a society that prides itself on subtlety and indirectness would have excellent diplomats. Sometimes things just line up. I don't know what to tell you. It just works. And then we got a stability check here. Precarious authority questioned by some. So not very stable, unfortunately for them. Precarious authority questioned by some. Not good for them. Not good at all. But they're just going to have to deal with that. And then who's been causing problems? Get thuggish constables or city guardsmen. Let's call it troublemakers. Thuggish constables or city guardsmen. Which also kind of makes sense because I think, let's see, in the southeast, they're sort of bigger people. They have fanged mouths. They kind of follow a Mongolian steppe nomadish kind of culture, which there may be some bit of might makes right that's in there. They've had past war savagery, so certainly there are things afoot in that way. And the monarchy is the strongest warlord. So someone who rules with strength like that might encourage, even if they don't really want to, that kind of behavior. And then a recent history, D20. Nine, corrupt officials plundered a great plan. Okay, corrupt officials plundered a great plan. Eight's plan. All right. Oh my gosh. I feel sometimes I've got information overload. Information overload here. There's just so much to sift through. I might have to just one time off stream because just might be just because it might be super. I mean, look, to the extent that this stuff is interesting at all, and I hope people find it interesting. And let me know if people's interest in this is waning. I can totally try to finish it up offline, but I feel like it's been a worthwhile exercise so far. But please let me know if you feel like you know what we've gone on long and far enough. Um, but I do sometimes feel like, man, there's just so much density of things to work with. It's great on the one hand, 'cause I feel like there's a lot to build off of to be able to pull into ideas for things. But on the other hand, it feels like I'm going to drown in all these details. Which I think if there's something to say about Worlds of the Number, it might be that, yeah, you can go through everything, but maybe sometimes you don't have to. Don't. Because this is going to be really useful to some games. Sometimes it might not be useful to other people's games. And if you have problems or you struggle with kind of analysis paralysis or looking at just a ton of stuff and trying to make sense of it, if that doesn't work to your strengths as a person, as a GM, then you could end up going down rabbit holes here that might not be, might not be good for you. Just putting in the headers here, make it maybe a little bit faster. I am cognizant of the time. This has been a quiet stream. So I'm just kind of motoring along, and somebody stop me if you're in the chat and you feel like stopping me with something. All right, let's back to how established is the current ruler. Extensive support network. Now I'm going to say that this is the ruler that's got that elected chosen, right? The person who's the Chancellor Valorum of the Southwestern, not the individual rulers, if we get into those details, but just at a high level, the Chancellor, the I don't know, King of Kings, whomever it is, they're the one that's got the support network, which may be the only way that they've been able to maintain control and potentially stay alive is because they've got this network that's helping them stay one step ahead of all the intrigue. Their ministers, they're out of touch or lazy. Well, that would hurt. It makes things more difficult if your ministers are out of touch or lazy. What is their strength? What is your strength, oh minister? I mean, I don't know what. Oh, government of governments. D10. Great legitimacy with the populace. That's interesting. That's an interesting wrinkle. Legitimacy with legitimacy with populace. That makes it tricky. How stable? This will be interesting because this one, by all accounts, should be pretty unstable. But watch me get some kind of super stable result, and I do. Watch me. Dice Maiden didn't let me down with the swerves. So it's stable, able to endure even fierce shocks, which they probably already have. That's pretty hilarious in a way. I mean, it's great. It's just funny because not necessarily what we expected. Withstand fierce shocks, and they've probably already been withstanding them. Now we get who's been causing problems. Who are the troublemakers here? Another D12. Corrupt and untrustworthy market officials. Oh, corrupt market officials. And then what happened in their recent history? What's a recent governmental event for this? 19. A large bureaucracy was dissolved. Ooh, that actually makes sense out here. Large bureaucracy, right? Not democracy. Large bureaucracy was dissolved. I mean, this is literally like the Palpatine thing, right? The Republic has finally been the what did they call it? The not the Parliament. What did they call whatever? You know what I'm saying? Star Wars, Palpatine taking over, dissolving the whatever they called it. It's all happening. It's all setting up. All right, and finally, which will probably be my last one for this. For today, I'm just going to fill in the bubbles first. Oops, switching slow. Let's see, we've got, what are the things here? Current ruler, minister problems, strength. Current ruler. Minister problems. Strength with stability after that. What was after? Strength, stability, troublemakers, recent history. Stability, troublemakers, recent history. Okay. So who the current ruler? Yeah, it's a D6. Or they have a hard core of useful supporters. So they have a core of useful supporters. Always good to have a core of useful supporters. And as far as problems, problem, D8. 8. They're committed to a very bad idea. I like that one. I think we can all feel for that one. Very bad idea. Yeah, I've been there, done that. I might be doing it right now. It remains to be seen. Get a D10 for strength. 1. Oh, they have an efficient bureaucracy. Extremely efficient bureaucracy. Those that can't hurt. How stable are we over here? Precarious. Precarious. That's like a Roman general. General Precarious. It's precarious. Authority questioned by some. Well, so much for everything going their way. And we get some troublemakers. Who could that be? Corrupt village headmen acting as tyrants. Interessant indeed. And then finally, what has happened in their recent histoire? We get major official was executed for treason. Boy, see, there it is. Look at that. Look how that stuff fits in. Major official executed for treason. I mean, so just to reset a little bit, we had already established in the northeastern region they had a problem with aspiring now suspected, and a wicked minister had been deposed. Now we find that in their recent events, yeah, a major official was executed for treason. Just totally makes sense that would be that minister that had just been deposed. Minister deposed, executed for treason. There it is. Yeah, some things fit together. I mean, that's just could not have predicted. Couldn't have predicted it, but it happened. All right, so it was good to get through these things. Slow stream today, but that's okay. I just keep motoring along. Folks, leave me to it. I just keep motoring. But yes, definitely let me know, folks, if you find that everyone's interest is waning. I may try to just do this offline as an exercise and not stream every day with it. It feels like people are kind of gotten out of the groove. I understand. I didn't even realize it had been almost 2 weeks or around about 2 weeks since I'd been in this last, just the way time went. So yeah, let me know about that. Look ahead to what's next. I guess I can close that down for right now. To look ahead to what's next. Again, history. So for the next stream, the next Logan's Run, I presume it will be the day after this, at least as far as when it appears on the YouTubes and the different places I'm streaming. It'll be history construction, where we'll start to build out more of that history, but we'll see about that. But something to look forward to, because it seems like there's some good stuff there. One thing I can already see, and maybe actually, you know what, I will go back to this. It's going to be interesting. I can already feel that it will be something that I will struggle with, because there's just a soup of stuff. I think the way this is laid out with this mind mapping approach, I think it's really great for looking at things at a glance, but it's easy to see with all these lines zipping back and forth. I like the lines because they remind me of connections that we've made. Visually looking at it, though, it's a mess. I don't know if there's different ways I can export it where I can get something more like footnotes that will be less intrusive and less messy and less cacophonic to go back and look at it. There is going to be a point where we're going to have to try to take all this stuff and build sort of some kind of narrative, put it in more gameable bits, right? Where we're actually going to be writing up the history, writing up the current state of the nation, starting to give them names and maybe give some of the important people in them names, and at least the kind of things, as Worlds Without Number mentions, that everything we should be doing should be leading towards adventure fodder, actionable things, right? We have these societies and we're getting into what they look like and how they operate and who rules them. But the stuff's not really important unless it's going to it's going to help adventures populate them, either with things that they're doing or things that they need. How is the party going to interact with them? They're not going to talk to the rulers of these kingdoms, but the rulers are going to set the tone, set in motion how these different societies operate. They could potentially be at higher levels when, at some point, adventurers, if they get that far, might interact with them directly, but they're more or less going to be the kind of figureheads, the kind of things that everything else is taking their cue from. So you're not dealing directly with Chancellor Valorum, who was essentially worthless in the Phantom Menace and in the prequels, in the Star Wars prequels, but maybe the fact is that you see Valorum and how he is, and that trickles down to how the bureaucracy is, and it gives you that sense of place and that sense of the society taking on that personality. But of course, we also have all this other detail. But somewhere we're going to have to take all these little fragments, because all they are now is just little fragments, little bits. We're going to have to take all of them and say, okay, now we're going to turn these into paragraphs, turn these into headings, and things that will be potentially hooks, things that a party on the ground level, we're looking at things, right? We're zooming, we're way up high, and we're looking down over this regional map and plunking these little things in. Okay, we're going to have to zoom in. And I think it's going to be a lot of work. When somebody, it might have been nothing, and Linky says, oh, what tangled webs. Yep, exactly. Going to be a lot of work. It's going to be interesting to see. And I don't know how streamable it will be. Maybe I'll just stream when I'm just sitting there trying to type all this stuff out, and hopefully folks will be here to chime in. We'll see. I don't know. Let me, just before I get off here, looking at how many more of these things we have. We're going to get into, so we got history coming up next, then we'll have some religion, and then we're getting into more, well, there's places of interest, locations, communities, court, ruins, wilderness. So we still have a fair amount of things to go, and then we'll have basically the big soup, and then it'll be taking that soup and sifting it, grabbing out little bits of this, grabbing out little bits of that, and trying to plunk it all in place. But it's been a fun ride so far, and I think one thing that we get from doing this, as opposed to just from the read-through, not that I don't think the read-through is useful, I wouldn't do them if I didn't think they were useful, but it's one thing to look at something and think, oh, I think this would work well, or oh, this is what I think it would do, and then going through it and saying, no, now I know how it will be, or at least for me. And the one thing I'll say, and the positive, is you get a lot of great hints of things you can do with. Now, the downside might be that if you don't rein in, I could see a little bit that you could end up with a map like mine, where you just have this crazy mess. And maybe you could work something out of it, or maybe you're going to get paralyzed looking at this and thinking, like, I don't need this much. So some people may not need to go through all these tables. You might feel compelled to. Certainly doing this for the exercise, I kind of feel compelled to go through all the things. But it might be something that, as a procedure, once you get used to it, you just come in and get what you need. You don't need to figure out some of these things until you get to that point. I'm trying to put together something that maybe at the end I'll have like a little resource for this whole thing. So I need to, if you're writing this out to put in other people's hands, like, oh, I'm going to publish this thing, well, then you kind of need to go through all the steps. If I was just using it for my home game and they're nowhere near there, I might just say, I just need just the briefest little bits about them, because they're way out on the periphery. Only when they kind of get closer will I start to fill in. So depending on how your process is and how your brain is wired and all this stuff, you might find this stuff really great, or you might find it just creating too much of a good thing, that sort of thing. But so far, so good. I'm going to take off, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, night, weekend, whenever you are watching or listening to this. As usual, communicate with me. Get with me in the chat, or community tab is great stuff. I got a voicemail you can leave. And now let me know how you're feeling about what we're doing, whether you feel like it's worthwhile or whether it's run its course and giving you everything you need to know. I'm here for you, as Tom Bodette from Motel 6 used to say. Till next time, game on. I will talk to you later.